Good morning, everybody. This morning I have Senator Richard Black with us today. We are going to be speaking about some of the attacks and escalation that's happening in the West Bank. So without further ado, I want to pass it over to Senator Black.
Yeah, Morgan, it's good to see you this morning. And Morgan and I have talked. We had a different topic initially, and this one just sort of got our attention. There has been an American killed in a Nazi-style pogrom against the Palestinians living in the West Bank. Just for those who don't know, there are essentially two major groups of Palestinians who are under attack by Israel. There is the group in Gaza, in the Gaza Strip, and that's the one that's best known. That's where there was the attack on the Israeli settlers. And in reprisal, the Israelis invaded the Gaza Strip. I think everybody expected there would be a reprisal for what happened. And but it didn't just stop. It wasn't like a military-style reprisal. It has gone on to where there probably have been a minimum of 100 Palestinians killed for every Israeli who died in those settlements in the initial attack. So the widespread slaughter of civilians within the Gaza Strip far outstrips anything that historically has been viewed as a reasonable, proportionate reprisal. So that's where all the focus and the news has been. But meanwhile, the Israeli settlers, who are very, very radical, extremist, very violent group of Jewish Israelis, they're very, very valued lands that the Palestinians have been forced into in the West Bank. Now, the West Bank is part of Israel. It's part of the Israeli nation. But very early on, Netanyahu transferred Israeli troops to support the settlers who are conducting widespread Nazi-style pogroms in the West Bank. Now, there was a lot said about the pogroms against the Jews in Europe, not just in Germany, but in other countries where people would, conduct raids on communities of Jews, and they'd beat them up or break their windows and this kind of thing. And what's going on in the West Bank is almost precisely what the pogroms were in the very early 40s in Germany. And so what's happening, there's a pogrom that affects the last majority Christian settlement in Israel. Israel has cleansed the country not only of the Muslim Palestinians, but also the Christians. Christians used to be about 20% of what's now Israel, and now they're less than 1%. So there's been a cleansing of Christians in Israel. There's certainly an ethnic cleansing of the Muslims. I can't say that one group has been more ethnically cleansed than the other, but you end up with this area of West Bank, predominantly Muslim um, uh, Palestinians who are Israeli citizens. And the Israeli army is providing shelter, sort of like if you imagine a big bully who stands in the background while somebody who is smaller beats up and hurts other people. This is what the Israeli army does. They're there, and so the settlers uh, invaded this one village, and um, they took this fellow, an American with Palestinian ancestry. He was there visiting family members when the settlers came in to steal his his family's house, and he didn't put up armed resistance or anything, but he tried to keep them out. And they took him and they savagely beat him, and they beat him to death. They didn't he didn't just get injured and later died. They beat him until he died. I think he's 20 or 23 years old. I'm not sure, one of the two.
Yes, he's 23.
23. Okay.
Yes.
There have been varying reports.
Mm-hmm.
He was an American from Tampa, Florida, just over there visiting relatives. And while he was being beaten and killed, the Israeli military stormed the village in a way that obstructed any paramedics, volunteers, anybody else from interfering with the murder. Now, it's important to understand this. In many ways, this is the history of Israel, is where you have Jewish people who go in under the guise of being settlers, and they steal. They just basically steal people's homes, their businesses, their property. And what they're doing in the West Bank is they take their cattle. The Jewish people take their cattle and turn them loose in the fields that are planted by the Palestinians living there. So the Jewish-owned cattle just go in and they eat the crops that support the Palestinians. So it very much resembles the Nazi-style pogroms. The Nazis, well, they did almost an identical thing. They didn't have an organized army at the time to stand right shoulder to shoulder with the people who would beat and terrorize the Jews in these towns. So, I mean, the irony of this, of course, is that there's this endless discussion about the victimhood of the Jewish people and how they were badly treated, and certainly they were. But it seems to not faze them at all that what they are doing is precisely what the Nazis did, not just, in some minor incident that it sort of resembles something very unfair, but it is almost a template. It is almost precisely what the Nazis did. It is equally brutal in every respect. And this just happened to pull in an American, a Yank from Tampa. So you pointed this out to me this morning, Morgan, you have some thoughts on this?
Yes, I mean, I believe it's important for us to note that this isn't an isolated occurrence. Last year, this time in April, it was actually the IDF forces that shot and killed another, I believe he was from Florida, a 14-year-old boy, and two other young boys, where they basically said, oh, we'll look into it, and we believe that these boys were up to terrorist activities. Again, these were little tiny, 14, 15-year-old children. That the video came out, and I believe he was shot in the back. Which, I don't really know how much damage you could do when your back is turned to somebody, but I digress. And then I believe a few months prior to the 14-year-old boy being killed, it was a 26-year-old woman who was protesting some of these legal settlements, and she was shot in the head. She was a dual citizenship with Turkey and America. And what I find just heartbreaking is that there's no retribution, there's no justice that gets pushed here when it happens. If it were an occurrence, I would say in Iran, where an American was brutally beaten by Iranians, it would be all over Western media, and it would be, talked about by every politician and rightly condemned. But here is this silence. You Google what happened to Sofalo Moussavet, excuse me if I can't pronounce his name correctly. You have global media taking more attention to this than Western media. And I find that utterly embarrassing. So that, those are really my thoughts, is that, we can't let this go. And we, for a nation like Israel that we fund, we subsidize their health care, their education. And in return, they can't show the due diligence and the respect that our citizens deserve when we go and visit this is the West Bank. They shouldn't even be there. But in their areas, their American safety should be, one of their priorities, given our quote unquote alliance. So that's just kind of how I feel about the situation. I'm glad that we pivoted to talk about this. I find it very, very important that we keep an eye on what's happening over there.
Yes. Now, I will say that I had not heard of this until you gave me a call this morning, and but an article that I pulled up a couple. One is from CNN. CNN did report it, I think, pretty well. MSNBC reported it. I haven't seen anything from Fox, but anyway, kudos to the American media that did have the journalistic
Integrity
ethics to go ahead and report what the news is.
Yeah. And
Now,
I think that is important to notify that it's not, a complete media blackout, but in the eyes of what I think it should be definitely front page of every media source, that, an American, especially the way that he was murdered was absolutely atrocious. And then his life could have been saved. I will admit, there are kind of conflicting reports, but the one solidified piece of thing that's being reported is that from 3 to 4 hours, the ambulance was blocked by the settlers. And then there's also reports by the IDF soldiers that were present, where they're blocking the ambulance. It wasn't until
I don't think there's much doubt that the Israeli soldiers today feel empowered to commit war crimes with impunity. And the idea that they were involved in blocking any ambulance from getting through, to ensure that this fellow died. Now, this is not somebody who was suspected of committing a crime or who was putting up armed resistance. This is somebody who is just keeping strangers from bursting into the home of his residence and trying to keep them out beaten to death because he was not Jewish and because his family had property that the Jewish settlers wanted, and they intended to take it. And they have been unleashed by Netanyahu to do whatever is necessary to cleanse the area of the Palestinian population. Now, let me just shift the topic a little bit here, because here's another kudo to American media for doing something that I think probably takes a little bit of courage these days. And this is the Wall Street Journal, believe it or not. But let's see here. Am I getting mixed up here? This is all happening so quickly. Yes, the Wall Street Journal had an article yesterday, and it is entitled, "Israelis' Military Lawyers Raise Concerns About the New Plan to Move Hundreds of Thousands of Gazans." And it says that the military legal branch, in other words, the JAG Corps of Israel, has questioned whether the plan would expose Israel to accusations of forced displacement, which is illegal under international law. Now, we've heard lots of ideas thrown around. Hold on, let me back up just a second. The Gaza Strip is a very small area right on the Egyptian border. It is on the very edge of areas that were conquered by Israel. It has no Jews. The population of the Gaza Strip is about 99% Sunni Muslim and 1% Christian. It is 0% Jews. And the plan of Israel is to eliminate, either to kill or to displace the entire population of the Gaza Strip. And there's all this talk about we're going to make it the Riviera where wealthy Jewish businessmen can hang out there, but it's an ethnic cleansing that goes beyond, I think, most of what the Nazis were accused of during the Second World War, although pretty close to that type of thing. And the campaign against the Gaza Strip has developed to where the Israelis have tremendous military dominance over the Gaza Strip. Gaza, that Hamas is always singled out. They are the government of Gaza Strip, and they also put up the military resistance. They really don't have what you would normally think of as an army, because they have been continuously under blockade for decades. Nobody in the Gaza Strip has ever flown in an airplane because airplanes can't fly in or out.
I guess
no
it's
one
sad.
has ever taken a plane trip. Nobody has, you can't.
I think it was the early 2000s, if I remember correctly, that they initially did have a landing strip. Gaza had a landing strip, but Israel bombed it in the talks with, pardon me, it's losing my mind. I'm forgetting the leader that was in charge at that time, but he wasn't accepting some deal, and so they just bombed their airport. And since then, they have not had an airport.
Yeah.
So
have no airport. They have no hospitals, no medical facilities. All of those have been systematically bombed. They have no means of getting food, so that the there have been occasionally these arrangements that a few trucks will be allowed to come in, and then there are Israeli snipers, and when people run up to get food, they gun down the people running for the food. And basically they attack, and they tell people, well, you better get out of here and go to this area, and indicating that that's a safe area. And then they bomb the safe area, they kill the people who retreat there, and then they tell them, well, you better run to this area. And people are running here and there and dragging their handful of belongings and dragging their children and dragging old crippled people, and they're just being chased from one place to the other. And when they arrive there, then they're bombed and they're slaughtered and blown to bits and all of this. I mean, it's you have to imagine that there are people who just look at this as sort of a funny game of torturing human beings. And so kudos to the Israeli JAG Corps. I used to train together with them. There was a very fine Israeli JAG officer who was in my class. I was the class leader at the Army Judge Advocate General School in Charlottesville, Virginia. It's a magnificent institution. And we were principally Marine Corps JAG, but we had Army JAG, but we did have a contingent of Marine JAG officers. We had one or two Navy JAG officers, and then we had some foreign officers, and there was quite a fine Israeli JAG officer. I think he later went on to be a judge of one of their top courts over there. But they had the same instruction that we had on the law of war. And so, kudos to the Israeli JAG Corps for raising their concerns and saying, look, if you engage in the massive displacement of civilian populations, this is a very serious war crime under international law. And this is well-established international law, something that everybody knew in the First World War and the Second World War, and it's not some new innovative thing, but it's very well established. And Morgan, what I wanted to do is sort of take people back a little bit and remember one of the most famous events of the Second World War, which was the Jewish uprising in the Warsaw Ghetto. And I'd like to show what a very close parallel this is to what is happening in the Gaza Strip today. Now, the Warsaw Ghetto, you recall that in the outbreak, the early days of the Second World War, Germany attacked into Poland, and the Soviet Union attacked into Poland in the opposite direction. So the Germans and the Soviets split Poland in half. Well, they two big pieces. I don't know what the percentages were, but anyway, Warsaw, the capital of Poland, is a very big city, and they took the 400,000 Jews and they forced them into a small area that covered 1.3 square miles. Now I forget the number of miles in the Gaza Strip. I'm thinking, I don't know, could it be like 6 miles? I don't know, but
I know it's like 5 by 30. It's a very, very small area.
okay.
Um,
My number could be way off, but it's a very small area and it's a desert area, unlike the Warsaw Ghetto. So we're talking about two small places. Warsaw Ghetto had 400,000 Jews. The Gaza Strip has 2.9 million Palestinians, and so there was extreme overcrowding in the Warsaw Ghetto. They had 7.2 people per room, probably very, very similar to what you have in the Gaza Strip. The conditions within the ghetto were described as horrific. Food rations were minimal, barely sustaining life. Starvation was widespread. Well, think about the Gaza Strip. The Israeli army has cut off all food, all water. People are clearly starving. The weaker people are starving and dying. The children have no food. The children are all malnourished. And there's a tremendous, very intense blockade everywhere from the ocean side. So the death toll in the Warsaw Ghetto, they said that thousands died each month from starvation and disease. Well, I think the death toll in Gaza is much greater than it was in the Warsaw Ghetto, because it's not just the starvation and disease that's killing people, but the Israeli army is dropping these 2,000-pound bombs and destroying every habitable type of building in the entire strip. I
yes.
doubt that historically there has ever been a sustained bombing campaign as intense as that being carried out against the civilians in the Gaza Strip, civilians and also a handful of armed people. And there is a systematic destruction of all of the medical facilities, all educational facilities, all museums, all government buildings, and on top of that, on all of the residential buildings, because people are so compacted in the Gaza Strip, it's been necessary to expand vertically. So people live in these cramped, multi-story apartment buildings, and the Israelis have systematically gone through and destroyed those buildings and killed as many people as they could inside. Now, we had a pretty good grip on how many Gazans had been killed in the very early part of the Israeli incursion. But what happened is, very quickly, the Hamas resistance, those fighters were almost all killed, and the government officials were almost all killed. And finally, and you didn't have hospitals to report the number of casualties being sent in, because there was nowhere to send the casualties. People just rot in the buildings where they die.
Yes.
So
The most it just breeds so barbaric, and there was a report I happened shortly after, and still I think it was in early of 2024, where they evacuated a hospital. I'm not sure if you remember this, and the doctors refused to evacuate because there was babies in the incubators. And they said, "Don't worry, we'll make sure that they get out," is what the Israeli army said. Whenever they were allowed to kind of come back into the hospital, they found that these babies decomposed in these incubators. They just left them to die. And there was picture evidence of it, because it just seems so barbaric you wouldn't believe it. That someone would look at a child and treat it with such disdain without, it even having the conception of what they are. This newborn child. I heard that, and you try not to get filled with rage, but that is one evidence, the thing that the Israeli army has done, that I find it so just devoid of any humanity. And that's what they had done to one of the hospitals. Our common person that we know, and person that I have the pleasure of working with, Dr. Mark Perlmutter, has gone into Gaza numerous times. And one thing that a lot of people certainly didn't think about is, through this bombing, it mixes the sewage with water sources. So the smell is everywhere. The smell of death is everywhere. In the first days of Israel kind of coming back and striking Gaza for what Hamas had done on October 7th, they talked about pumping water into these tunnels. And it completely destroyed the fresh water sources. And they said that resources say that they've completely destroyed the fresh water sources for decades to come. And I think it's an important aspect while we talk about the Warsaw ghettos and the uprising. They used tunnel systems.
Yes.
You had the men who were rising up, and they couldn't witness what was happening to their children, to their wives, to their sisters. And they were going against a organized group, a militarized group that had more resources, more control. And so they utilized this tunnel system to try and, reclaim some dignity back. And I think that's a very interesting kind of correlation that we're drawing.
It's almost a precise template, because then at a certain point, when there began to be some resistance to the Nazis, they proclaimed a great action, and the great action was the mass deportation of some 300,000 Jews from the Warsaw Ghetto to Treblinka, where many of them died later. And here we are talking about this and saying, well, wouldn't it be kind of nifty if we could just move all of these Palestinians, maybe we move them to Libya, or I forget, there's some African countries where we would deposit them to die out in the desert. And we need, I think it's very important for American history that we not fall for these various schemes of moving the Palestinians like this, which are clearly war crimes. They're clearly major war crimes. And even though, we're such a powerful country that it's difficult to prosecute Americans, we do not want to be complicit in major historic war crimes that are every bit the equal of what the Nazis did in the Second World War. The plan right now seems to be that what they would do is the Israelis want to take a major part of the Gaza population and move them into a concentration camp, a barbed wire concentration camp surrounded by Israeli soldiers, and no one would be allowed to leave. There would be no means of supporting yourself, and they'd be sort of at the mercy of the generosity of the Israeli army to occasionally throw them a few crumbs of food over the wire. That's a hideous thing. I mean, you know, and they don't call it a concentration camp, but the Israelis have ordered the military to prepare for establishing a camp. They call it a humanitarian city, and you know, the words above the entrance to the Auschwitz concentration camp were these very nice words. It said, "Your work will set you free."
Mm-hmm.
So here we have this, you know, this camp, this concentration camp, which was a humanitarian city.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe they could get the same script that was used in Auschwitz and duplicated, just to have a historic touch.
Yes, language is very, very important. I think that's what, you know, you read some of these articles and you see it. If you're able, you know, to think critically, you know, the people died in Gaza. Well, you know, it doesn't really specify, Israel opened fire on civilians kind of thing that would, you know, propel a reaction or, you know, invoke a reaction out of you if you were to kind of get the big picture of what's really going on. You know, like these people being ushered to one section of Gaza, and the next day they say they got to usher to the next section. You know, people think, oh, okay, how would you take it if, you know, one day you were living in your home and you get this notification on your phone, oh, you got to leave because the area, we've deemed your area, you know, dangerous and we might bomb it. So you need to, you know, get out of there in the next 10 minutes. It's unrealistic. It's barbaric. And I wish that we would encourage people to think critically that if this was, you know, we take the telescope back and we say, okay, it's the Palestinians that are collecting these Israelis that are predominantly Jewish people into these little enclaves and attacking them, opening fire on them, I think we would understand perfectly what's happening as the parallel from, you know, history. So I think this is a really brilliant segment that we dedicated today. I wanted to show the image of the the hospital that I was talking about was El Nasser Children's Hospital. We actually, I believe it was CNN, MSNBC, they did report on it. But I just wanted to show a picture of that just so people can go and they can read that, that these newborns were found decomposing in the hospital when the Israeli army told them, the doctors refused to leave until they wanted to ensure the safety of these newborns, lied to them and left these babies to starve to death and die.
Well, I don't think we have much good news today, but I think it's important that we went ahead and talked about this, because I just don't want our country to be more complicit than we already are in something that I think is every bit the equal of anything that the Nazis did in the lead up to the Second World War. So we will keep trying to bring about some balance in policy. And anyway, thank you very much for bringing this to our attention today.
Yes, I'm glad that we talked about this, and I think the silver lining, the beautiful aspect maybe we can cling on to in all this is that truth always does prevail. Truth wins, and the better judgment of humanity always leans towards, caring for one another. And these little spurts of darkness in our history, they do correct themselves. We, those of us who have a love for all humanity, we are righteously on the good side and trying to call this out. And one day, this will be recognized for what it is. And it just takes us to persevere and continue to talk about this and call this out. So I think that's what we can leave today with, and understanding that, truth does win. Good does win, even though sometimes we feel like evil is catching the upper leg on us, and we just have to continue at it. So thank you, Senator, for all you do and speaking and calling truth and speaking for the good of humanity. It's truly a blessing to share the stage with you. So with that, I will say that catch us next week to focus on the news.
Thank you, Morgan.